tell us about that.
I think the biggest challenge probably for all of us is funding.
That's what I was
We
gonna
have
say.
lots, you were just going to say that. Funny thing, no, it's really hard because you can be very attractive for a little while. You know, when I was working with people with disabilities, deafness was very, very sexy. Boy, to be deaf was really great. And I thought to myself, I bet I got 5 years to set something up here. And sure enough, 5 years time went by and deafness was nothing. So, and Seeds of Peace also, we were thrown into the limelight by the Oslo Accord. We were invited to the Oslo Accord, and 100 countries had us on TV. And, you know, you couldn't have paid for PR like that no matter what. But we're not always in style. We're not always the favorite charity. And we still have to raise $5 million a year to do the little bit that we do. And we're all NGOs are in this position. I thought, well, we have such a great idea. There's surely going to be an angel somewhere who's just going to adopt us and fund us. And I get so upset when I look around and see other organizations where somebody has done that, and the people doing the work don't have to spend 60% of their time raising money, you know. But that hasn't happened to us. May it happen to you. So, I mean, that is the biggest. It's crazy because you have to pay the people who work for you. They're not all going to volunteer. You have to. There are things you have to pay for in order to exist. So.
Yeah, I was going to say funding, but then so obviously it is an issue. But for me, one of the challenges is that I feel like a salmon swimming upstream a lot. That a lot of the work, especially when we were doing more interfaith work, the dominant methodology was, let's get kids together, we'll plan service projects for them, and they'll talk about their shared values. And it was often very one-shot kinds of things, and then we'll go away. And everybody, you know, what I said is, we all have pictures on our websites, and I'm guilty as the next, you know, girl with hijab, sitting, working next to somebody else who doesn't look Muslim, with some, you know what I mean? And because what we're saying is that the depth really matters. It's not enough to sort of say, oh, 12,000 people came to our event. Well, what happened when they all gathered in that auditorium for 2 hours? And, you know, in this age of Twitter, everybody's sort of like, everybody's saying, Janet, you should Twitter. I'm like, I don't have time to Twitter. You know, this work is deep, and it takes a long time. And convincing people that sometimes the sexiest thing isn't always the way to make a difference. And so that's something that's really challenging. And also trusting that, well, maybe they know something that I don't know. You know what I mean? Like, again, it's that whole thing of if everybody else is doing it this way, maybe I should be thinking about it. But so sort of grappling with that.
I also think that one of the challenges that youth lead can face is that you're trying to teach a group of youth these skills how to participate and run in dialogues. And these skills, you know, they have multiple trainings a year, and we'll go and we'll get taught all these skills and taught how to use them. We'll get to practice them in this like 6-hour session, and then time goes by, and over time, like anything, like things are going to fade away. So it's the idea of trying to keep these skills alive, and how you do that is through practice, is by giving us the opportunity to use the skills that we're learning in discussions, and particularly difficult discussions, like traveling, you know, to a different high school and talking to those kids that aren't like us, and really learning how to, not only what these skills are, but how to apply these skills, because through application of these skills is the only way that you're really going to come about any success in what you're trying to teach people, and how it's going to be sustainable, and how you're really going to sustain everything you're learning and understand not only like the rules of how you do things, but how it applies in discussions and in real life in every situation when you're working with other people.
So the fantastic thing about being in a student organization is that I work with a 19-person executive board and pay none of them. It's fantastic. So, that being said, though, there are two problems that really came to mind when talking about like the big problems we face. One is that the sort of college life is very transient, and there are always people coming and going in our volunteers and therefore in our board. So one of the biggest problems we face structurally and sort of on the organization side is how do you maintain membership base, especially when you're not paying people, when we work 20, 30 hours a week, and the only reason we're really there is because we're committed to the youth we serve and we're committed to each other. And other than that, there's really not anything saying you have to be there. So that's been one of our huge problems is retaining members when there's so many other opportunities at Northeastern, and the world is maintaining that sort of that structure and that institutional memory has been a big issue, and it's one that we're constantly facing. But we are very committed, and that's why we've been able to sustain it for so long. With I think our operating budget is like $2,000 right now. But the other problem we face that is really big is that Northeastern is comprised of a majority of white students, and we work in communities with Black and Latino students as the majority. So one of our biggest hurdles is that dialogue that you have to have with because we're really a guest in these communities, and we go and we try to build relationships with students and with youth, and that are in very different places where most of our members come from. And so it's really it takes a lot of effort to build, especially new members, to kind of build that knowledge of how do you interact with people that don't look the same as you, that come from different backgrounds, like socioeconomic and in race, and how do you still have constructive dialogue and a constructive program when there is like that really huge gap of like when you've made it to college, you're generally you come from like a pretty at least middle class background, like I'm talking averages, but like majority of our volunteers are white. They have come from like relative affluence, whereas a lot, like I think 50% of the youth we work with won't ever graduate high school, and so it's those kind of disparities that I think is really something that we're constantly working with our training and with working with our members and with ourselves too, like really walking that fine line between like rich college students who want to make themselves feel better by going in and like helping underprivileged kids, but then also that's not really understanding that's not our goal. Our goal is to empower youth who really are amazing human beings and can have a great future if they have the resources and people who are dedicated to serving them. So those are the two big issues that we work with even if you do have money, just to give you some perspective, when you do get your angel funder, you'll just find another problem that's just a thing.
No, we have plenty of other problems, but that's our biggest one.
So we have Corrymeela has a $2 million operating budget a year. But the one thing that I wanted to sort of, so that's a challenge, constantly sort of trying to raise that money each year. The thing that you mentioned that really sort of struck with me and I was thinking about was the institutional memory, that retaining that and standing on the shoulders of, the students that start at Corrymeela are now in their 60s and their 70s, and they're still involved in a way. Many of them are still involved around sort of the support of the centre, and it's just a constant challenge that we don't drift away from our sort of mission and the uniqueness of what we're about. It would be really easy for us to drift away from that, and yet some of those things are important changes. You have to, in order to be able to connect to young people in 2011, you can't be there's some of the things in the 90s and the 80s and 90s are just not relevant. So there's sort of that constant sort of tension between those who are on the peripheral, thinking of the good old days, trying to sort of influence sort of the operations of what's going on today. And that's just a constant sort of tension that we live with. it would be really easy for our centre to turn into a recreational centre, a holiday camp or a hotel, and for us to turn it into a business. And that's a constant challenge. We constantly are checking ourselves. Have we become too professional? Are we moving away from our sort of our grassroots and all of that? And that's just a sort of a constant sort of check that we have on ourselves.